Welcome to our series on the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are glad that you are here. In this module, we begin Chapter 9, which is titled Of Free Will. This is a chapter that touches on one of the most debated questions in all of Christian theology. What does it mean to have a free will? Can we truly choose? And if so, what are the limits of that freedom? Section 1 lays the foundation by establishing a principle that every other section in this chapter will build upon, that God has given the human will a real, natural liberty. Let us look carefully at what the confession teaches. In our previous chapter, we walked through the full work of Christ as mediator. We saw how the Son of God was appointed from eternity, took on a true human nature, fulfilled the offices of prophet, priest, and king, and effectually applies redemption to all those the Father has given him. That chapter ended with the assurance that Christ certainly and effectually brings his people to salvation. But now a natural question arises. If Christ applies redemption, what is happening on the human side? What is the state of our will? Can we choose God on our own, or do we need his grace? Chapter 9 takes up this question directly. It traces the human will through 4 distinct states, from creation to glory, and Section 1 establishes the foundational principle that runs through all of them. Let us now read the text of Westminster Confession, Chapter 9, Section 1. God hath endued the will of man with that natural liberty that is neither forced nor by any absolute necessity of nature determined to good or evil. This is a remarkably compact statement, but every phrase carries theological weight. Notice that the confession begins not with what man does, but with what God has done. God has endued, that is, God has equipped or endowed, the human will with a particular kind of liberty, and this liberty has 2 defining characteristics. It is not forced from outside, and it is not driven by some inner mechanical necessity toward either good or evil. The first key phrase in this section is natural liberty. What does the confession mean by this? It means that the will, by its very nature as God created it, acts voluntarily. When you make a choice, that choice is genuinely yours. It flows from your own mind, your own desires, your own judgment. No one is reaching inside you and pulling a lever. Robert Shaw, in his exposition of the Westminster Confession, explains that according to the Reformed understanding, the liberty of a moral agent consists in the power of acting according to a choice. Those actions are free, which are performed without any external compulsion or restraint, in consequence of the determinations of one's own mind. And here is a crucial point. This natural liberty is not something we had only in the Garden of Eden and then lost. The confession teaches that it belongs to the will in every state of human existence. Whether we are speaking of Adam before the fall, fallen humanity after Adam's sin, the regenerate believer, or the glorified saint in heaven, in every case, the will retains this natural liberty. We always act voluntarily. The confession says the will is neither forced. This is an important safeguard. It means that God does not coerce the human will. He does not compel us to act against our own inclinations. Even in the work of regeneration, where God powerfully changes a sinner's heart, he does not override the will. Rather, he transforms the heart's desires so that the person freely and willingly turns to Christ. As James tells us, each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. The will follows the heart. This distinction matters because it separates Reformed theology from fatalism. A fatalist says that human choices are meaningless because everything is determined by blind forces beyond our control. The confession says something very different. It says that God is sovereign, yes, but that he works through our willing, not against it. We are not puppets. We are moral agents who genuinely choose, even though God is at work behind and beneath every choice. The second safeguard in the confession is equally important. The will is not determined by any absolute necessity of nature. This means the human will does not function like a physical law. A stone falls because gravity compels it. A chemical reaction proceeds because the laws of physics require it. But the human will does not work that way. We are not driven by blind necessity. We deliberate, we weigh alternatives, we consider consequences, and then we choose. This is precisely what makes human beings moral agents. If our choices were simply the inevitable product of physical causes, like falling dominoes, then praise and blame would be meaningless. But God made us as rational, willing creatures. Our choices flow from our character, our understanding, and our desires. And this is what makes them truly ours, and what makes us genuinely accountable before God. Now we come to what may be the single most important distinction in the entire chapter on free will: the difference between liberty and ability. These two words sound similar, but they mean very different things, and confusing them has led to centuries of theological error. Liberty means the will is not forced. We always choose voluntarily, according to our own desires and inclinations. This is true in every state. Even the most hardened sinner chooses freely in this sense. But ability is a different question. Ability asks what the will can actually accomplish, given the moral condition of the person. And here is the key. A fallen sinner retains full liberty, but has lost the ability to choose spiritual good. Jesus makes this point vividly in the Sermon on the Mount. A healthy tree bears good fruit, but a diseased tree bears bad fruit. The diseased tree is not being forced to produce bad fruit. It does so freely, according to its nature. But it cannot produce good fruit because its nature will not allow it. In the same way, fallen humanity freely chooses sin, not because anyone forces us, but because our nature, corrupted by the fall, inclines us away from God. The remaining sections of chapter 9 will trace this principle through 4 states of human existence. Section 1 establishes the principle of natural liberty, and then sections 2 through 5 apply that principle across the 4 states of human existence. This framework goes back to Augustine, and it was adopted by the Reformed tradition as a powerful way to understand the will's relationship to sin and grace. In the state of innocence, which section 2 will cover, Adam had both the liberty and the ability to choose good or evil. He was able to sin, and he was also able not to sin. In the state of the fall, which section 3 addresses, humanity retains the liberty of the will, but has lost the ability to do any spiritual good. We are not able not to sin, as Augustine put it. We freely choose, but we always choose in accordance with our corrupted nature. In the state of grace, which section 4 covers, God frees the believer from bondage to sin and restores the ability to choose what is spiritually good. Yet because of remaining corruption, the believer still struggles with sin in this life. And finally, in the state of glory, section 5 teaches that the will is made perfectly and unchangeably free to do good alone. The glorified saint is not able to sin. This is the highest freedom, not the ability to choose evil, but the inability to choose anything but what is perfectly good. Each section builds on the foundation that section 1 has laid. In all 4 states, the will retains its natural liberty. What changes is not the freedom of the will, but its moral ability. Let us take a moment to reflect on what we have studied. First, think about the distinction between liberty and ability. How would you explain this difference to someone who has never studied theology? You might use an analogy. A person locked in a room is at liberty to leave. No one is holding them down, but they lack the ability to get through the locked door. In the same way, fallen humanity is at liberty to choose God, but our corrupted nature keeps us from actually doing so. Second, consider why it matters that God works through our willing rather than against it. If God simply overrode our wills, we would be robots, not moral agents. But God transforms our hearts so that we genuinely want what is good. This preserves both divine sovereignty and human responsibility. Third, think about the charge that sovereignty makes our choices meaningless. The confession's answer is clear. God's sovereignty and our genuine choosing are not in competition. God ordains the ends and the means, and our willing choices are the means through which He works. Let us summarize what we have learned. The Westminster Confession begins its teaching on free will, not with a debate about Calvinism and Arminianism, but with a simple foundational principle. God has endowed the human will with natural liberty. This means that our choices are genuinely our own. The will is not forced by any external power, and it is not driven by blind necessity. We are rational, moral agents who deliberate and choose. But the confession also lays the groundwork for a crucial distinction that will shape everything that follows. Liberty is not the same as ability. The will is always free in the sense that it is never coerced, but what the will can actually accomplish depends on the moral state of the person. A fallen sinner freely chooses sin because that is what the corrupted heart desires. Only the grace of God can change the heart and restore the ability to choose what is spiritually good. In our next module, Section 2 will show us how this principle applied in the state of innocence, before the fall. Adam possessed both liberty and ability. He could choose good, and he could choose evil. But his goodness was mutable. It could be lost, and tragically it was.